The CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. The West German parliament late today rejected threats from Moscow and violent protest by some of its own people and approved the deployment of new U.S. nuclear missiles. Arrival of those weapons could begin tomorrow. John Blackstone reports from Bonn.
As West Germany's parliamentarians rose to vote, it was a climax of 3 years of public debate over whether Germany should become even more heavily armed. In 3 years, those who govern West Germany saw the peace movement grow, but they also saw no success in arms negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union. And so tonight, they voted. Chancellor Helmut Kohl always said without some Soviet arms reduction, the new missiles would have to come to Germany. Former Chancellor Helmut Schmidt said yes, the missiles were necessary, but he said the United States had not tried hard enough in the negotiations. Another former Chancellor, Willy Brandt, said no. The United States expected Germany to act like a model schoolboy, taking whatever Washington had to offer. There was strong opposition both inside and outside Parliament, but the government has a majority, and tonight the missiles were approved. The final vote was 286 yes, 226 no. Even before the vote, an American base in West Germany seemed to be making preparations to accept the new missiles. An extra barbed wire fence was put up around the perimeter of the U.S. base at Muttlingen. It seemed designed to keep demonstrators well back. Servicemen also began putting up a camouflage screen that would make viewing of the arrival of the new missiles difficult. The West German anti-nuclear movement has lost the campaign it has been waging for 3 years. Tonight, outside the federal parliament, hundreds of police were standing by, and the area was sealed with iron barricades. But the demonstration was muted. The anti-nuclear movement is not likely to go away. It will make itself heard as tonight's decision is implemented and the new Cruise and Pershing II nuclear missiles begin to arrive in Germany. John Blackstone, CBS News, Bonn.
The Pershing II is a mobile two-stage ballistic missile. It is the nuclear weapon scheduled for immediate deployment in West Germany. The cruise missile will not arrive there until 1986. As Pentagon correspondent David Martin reports, it is not the immediacy of the Pershing that the Soviets fear, it is the accuracy.
Look at the Pershing II through Soviet eyes. Look at it as an incoming missile. One of these missiles could be launched from West Germany and land on Russian soil 10 minutes later. It is to the Kremlin a kind of Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse. The first Pershing IIs will be based here at Schwabisch Gmünd. Eventually, the U.S. plans to deploy 108 in West Germany, replacing these earlier models. With thousands of nuclear weapons already aimed at the Soviet Union, the addition of 108 missiles is crucial not in terms of destruction, but in terms of time.
The Pershing is the system that really bothers them the most.
Missiles launched from submarines lurking off the Soviet coast can strike with little warning, but they are not nearly so accurate as the Pershing II. Each Pershing warhead is equipped with a computerized radar map of its target that allows it to make last-second adjustments to its course, giving it a pinpoint accuracy.
There will be enough Pershings to severely cripple Soviet command and control associated with prosecuting a war in Western Europe.
The old Pershings had only a 400-mile range. The 1,100-mile range of the new Pershings reaches deep into Soviet territory.
The Soviets say it has a range of 1,500 miles, and the difference is Moscow. The difference is significant.
The Pentagon denies that.
The Pershings cannot reach Moscow.
Whatever the actual range, the Russians have repeatedly threatened to counter the Pershing IIs with new missile deployments of their own. But no one in the U.S. is sure what they have in mind.
I don't believe that they're sure what they're going to do yet.
They would like to have a system that they could deploy within range of the United States in 10-minute flight-to-target time. They almost certainly will not deploy strategic missiles in Cuba, again, as they did in 1962, or in Nicaragua, or any place else in this hemisphere.
I think they will continue to deploy nuclear weapons in Eastern Europe, as they have been doing for many years. And they will take programs previously decided upon and dress them up as though they were a response to the modest deployment of cruise missiles and Pershing missiles by the United States.
Will they do anything that they would not otherwise have done?
I rather doubt it, but one can never be sure.
President Reagan said today the Soviets might walk out on the arms control talks in Geneva, but not permanently.
If the Russians do walk out, the question will be whether they return in time to strike a deal that would head off further deployments of the Pershing II missile. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The next session of the intermediate-range missile talks is scheduled for tomorrow in Geneva. For the time being, at least, the U.S.-Soviet negotiations on reducing long-range nuclear missiles are proceeding. The two sides met for an hour today and agreed to meet again next Tuesday. The cruise missile had its first full operational test and evaluation flight 3 days ago. It was a failure. The Pentagon said today that the General Dynamics-made missile was launched from the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, and everything appeared perfect at first. But 18 minutes, 50 seconds into the flight and 70 miles downrange, it crashed. No damage, no injuries, and no explanation of what went wrong with the cruise.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father.
Over the river and through the woods, the image of traveling through the snow to grandmother's house is straight out of Currier and Ives. Those 19th century prints make it all look easy and fun. In the western part of the United States today, that was not always the case. Ned Potter shows why.
In Boulder, Colorado, the problem was not just snow, but the rain that had come before it. Now the streets were icy, with cars slipping and sliding and occasionally hitting each other. On a highway 40 miles east of Denver, a truck overturned with 85 head of cattle on board. 14 of them were killed. People said it was a freakish storm. The snow was unusually heavy for this early in the season. For several hours last night, the town of Payson, Arizona was cut off from the rest of the world. 8 inches of snow closing the roads in all directions. They were reopened by dawn, but meanwhile the storm was heading north and east. Sioux Falls, South Dakota had 5 inches by late afternoon. A nearby university closed a day early for the holiday because blizzard conditions there are forecast for tomorrow. The next major target on the storm track was Minneapolis-St. Paul, where snow began to mix with freezing rain. Forecasters said that by the time it's over, there could be 5 inches in the city and 10 inches surrounding. The storm threatens to interfere with Thanksgiving travel, but the Weather Service said that by tomorrow night's rush, most of the country will be digging out. The only remaining snowfall will be in the upper Midwest. Ned Potter, CBS News, Chicago.
Prosecutors completed their case today in the perjury trial of Rita Lavelle. She's the former top official of the Environmental Protection Agency. The jury saw a tape of Rita Lavelle testifying to Congress last February that the only EPA documents she took away when she was fired were her own appointment calendars. Today, 2 of her former aides testified that when Rita Lavelle was fired, 3 briefcases full of sensitive EPA documents were taken away, transferred from a car trunk in the middle of the night, and that the briefcases were later seen in Rita Lavelle's apartment. One month after the devastating terror bombing of the U.S. Marine headquarters in Beirut, the Reagan administration today issued a stunning indictment. Officially, Syria was responsible. Bill McLaughlin reports.
Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger today went further than any other administration official in identifying those responsible for the massacre of 239 U.S. servicemen in Beirut last month.
They are basically Iranians with sponsorship and knowledge and authority of the Syrian government.
Sources here believe Weinberger's charge raises the stakes considerably in what has so far been mainly a game of bluff poker between the U.S. and Syria. But Syria insists it is not bluffing. It has praised the bombing of the Marine barracks, threatened suicide air attacks on the U.S. fleet off Lebanon, moved new missiles into the hills overlooking Beirut, and may have already fired those missiles at U.S. Navy F-14s. And all the while, Syria boasts that it is not alone, that it is backed by the military might of the Soviet Union. Less than 50 miles, in fact, now separate U.S. and Soviet forces in the area. Experts on Soviet policy believe Moscow is becoming increasingly nervous with the Syrian regime. They say the Soviets were privately shocked by the Marine massacre and are now anguishing over Syria's attack on Yasser Arafat and his PLO loyalists. But they believe the Soviets have no other friends in the Middle East, and the Syrians know it. The U.S. is frustrated, hence the new U.S. move to forge a strategic arrangement with Israel, whose president, Chaim Herzog, met today with President Reagan.
The Mideast game being played out in Lebanon now has several players, all of them armed and dangerous, perhaps well out of proportion to Lebanon's importance, and none of them may be bluffing anymore. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, the State Department.
Tripoli was under the gun again today. PLO rebels out for Yasser Arafat's blood shattered their self-imposed ceasefire of last night with a relentless artillery barrage. At least 30 people were killed. The rebels gave Arafat 72 hours to get out of the northern Lebanese city or, quote, we will attack him in the streets. They then stilled their guns again to give Arafat another chance to think. For the people caught in the middle, there was no question but that they would leave, as Martha Teichner reports from Tripoli.
The women cry as they leave their homes near Tripoli's port. In the night, Yasser Arafat's war reached these people. And now, when there is a lull in the bombing, they pack a few bundles and huddle into the truck that will take them away.
They are leaving them home and they don't know where they are going.
For the poor, shelter is often a basement, a few light bulbs strung up, if there is any electricity, a mat on the earth floor. There are no toilets, no windows, but there is at least a feeling of safety. Hundreds of people sleep here. The people who live in the streets around Yasser Arafat's headquarters are not waiting for the bombing to begin again. They are moving out now. And where they're going, by the truckload every few minutes, is an astonishing statement about what they think the odds are. They are going back to the Badawi camp because they think the rubble and wreckage controlled now by the rebels is safer than Tripoli. The gunfire they hear now is aimed at the place they've just left.
They prefer Arafat in spite what happened.
But they come here just because of safety?
Yes.
This woman thought she was coming home. Martha Teichner, CBS News, in the Badawi camp.
Iraqi warplanes went on the attack over the Persian Gulf today. They sank a Greek merchant ship as it was sailing from an Iranian port. Lloyd's Shipping Intelligence, part of the insurance company, said in London that a French-built Exocet missile was used. All of the Greek ship's 19 crew members were reported safe. Iraq earlier claimed it sank 7, quote, enemy ships yesterday. In another report, an Iraqi army commander said that his forces had killed more than 10,000 Iranians in one battle over the weekend. In a Japanese coastal resort town southwest of Tokyo today, a propane gas tank exploded in a crowded restaurant, killing 14 people, injuring 27. A person who lives nearby said she thought it was an earthquake. The Japanese explosion apparently was triggered by a spark. President Reagan says that the reason the federal debt has reached a record height in his administration is that domestic spending hasn't been cut enough. But today, Martin Feldstein, the head of the president's own Council of Economic Advisors, said the main culprits for the federal debt are increased defense spending and the president's own tax cut. He was careful not to say that these policies were wrong, but that they were why the debt was so high. American consumers want good products with low prices. American workers want good jobs with high wages. Increasingly, that seems to mean that American workers lose out altogether. We continue our special series on war in the workplace tonight with Ray Brady reporting from the foreign front.
For more and more U.S. companies, these are women worth leaving home for. They're young, most in fact are teenagers. They're Mexican, and best of all, they'll work for about 87 cents an hour, and they'll work hard.
They were equal in productivity and quality to U.S. workers, and in some cases superior.
Just across the border from El Paso, Juarez, Mexico is a government-designated low-wage industrial zone, offering American and other multinational companies huge tax benefits as well as low wages. There are more than 60 low-wage zones in the less developed countries, and they are one of American management's most potent weapons against American workers. Case in point, this outboard marine plant in Illinois. Workers agreed to a rollback in wages, but it was not enough to satisfy management. Result, the company moved one of its divisions here, to Juarez, where CBS was not permitted to film inside. Had we filmed inside, you'd see women working for wages which, by American standards, are ridiculously low. Women like Consuelo Martinez, who works for RCA. She helped support her large family and her unemployed parents on 87 cents an hour. For American companies, the supply of women like Consuelo Martinez is virtually unlimited.
Some of our plant managers have declared publicly we have for every job 100 people that want it, and we can choose the cream of the crop.
Numbers like that make Sam Drake's job easier.
Thank you.
Once a career officer in the U.S. Army, Drake now recruits businessmen like Cal Kessler to move their operations to Mexico.
What we are going to try to show you today is a way of reducing these costs so that you can remain competitive in the world marketplace.
Drake believes many U.S. firms have a tough choice. Either move at least part of their operation here for the cheap Mexican wages,
Cal Kessler, Oriana Gonzalez Vargas,
or else lose out to lower-priced foreign competitors. If that happens, Drake says, the higher-paying jobs still in the U.S. will be in danger as companies retrench. But others say survival is not the reason so many U.S. multinationals are coming here. Greed, they say, is.
No companies, no group of companies in the world make the rates of profit that American corporations insist upon. American corporations are extraordinarily greedy relative to all the other private companies, industry by industry, in the rest of the world.
No one is saying the U.S. government should ban multinational companies from hopscotching the globe in search of cheap labor. But what angers critics is that U.S. tax policy directly and indirectly encourages companies to move jobs abroad. Case in point, RCA does research and development on its TV sets in Princeton, New Jersey, but it assembles TV sets here in Juarez. Last year, RCA's research and development investment helped earn the company a tax refund of more than $14 million. These Mexicans are working in part courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer, who paid RCA to develop products the Mexicans helped to make. Fred Mitchell, a U.S. businessman working for a Mexican firm, sees nothing wrong with that.
Anything that we can do to build jobs in Mexico is a lot better than bringing workers into the United States, legally or illegal.
MIT's Bennett Harrison disagrees. He says the message to U.S. firms should be this.
If you want to build overseas, that's your privilege. We can't stop you, but we're not going to give you taxpayers' money to help you do it.
Even if Congress does decide to repeal tax incentives for foreign investment, it's unlikely that any government or labor organization can stop a multinational company from leaping across national boundaries. By 1990, it's estimated that at least 500,000 Mexicans will be working for multinational corporations in Mexico alone, with many more willing and able to do so as the giant U.S. firms just a stone's throw away seek the cheapest possible way to get the job done. Ray Brady, CBS News, Juarez.
Clearly, all is not hopeless for the American worker. Tomorrow night, we'll conclude our special series with a report from Jane Bryant Quinn. It's about how in some businesses, labor and management have made a productive truce in the war in the workplace. The stock markets closed up today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was the second highest ever. Emmy Award-winning actor Michael Conrad, better known to many TV viewers of Hill Street Blues as fatherly, soft-spoken Sergeant Esterhaus, has died. He had been treated for cancer the past 2 years. Not only was he a fixture of that show, but his weekly admonition in his role of Sergeant Esterhaus took on a measure of national fame, too.
Pretty careful out there.
Be careful out there. Michael Conrad was 58. It was 20 years ago today, that day in Dallas, those gunshots heard round the world, the day President John F. Kennedy died. Today, 20 years later, members of the Kennedy family gathered together in the daybreak chill. Gathering by the eternal flame overlooking Washington, to forget the cruel chill of that day and bask in the warmth of his memory on this day. It was a mix of past and present, joy and sadness, pastoral and political, public and private, that was repeated throughout this day, and at a special memorial mass at Washington's Holy Trinity Roman Catholic Church, political leaders, separated by the years and by philosophy, sat side by side for this service. There was Caroline Kennedy, the shy 6-year-old then, now just a few days shy of 26. Today, delivering the lines of a speech her father did not live to deliver.
Let us stand together with renewed confidence in our cause, united in our heritage of the past and our hopes for the future, and determined that this land we love shall lead all mankind into new frontiers of peace and abundance. We pray to the Lord.
And there was the last surviving Kennedy brother, Ted, noting that his fallen brother John had every gift but the length of years.
He said and proved in word and deed that one man can make a difference, which is why his 1,000 days will be remembered for 1,000 years and more.
The late president's 93-year-old mother, Rose, and former First Lady Jacqueline, chose to remember at the family compound on Cape Cod, to remember that time 20 years ago when the torch was passed to a new generation. The Kennedy generation now has grown up. The generation of why not, now the generation of what if, and now keeper of the flame that makes one generation's personal memory kindle the next generation's sense of history. For CBS News, Dan Rather reporting from New York. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Sawyer. Tomorrow, does selenium prevent cancer? And in our 8:30 half hour, live actor Mike Farrell. Wake up to what's happening on the CBS Morning News.
This is CBS.